We all think we know the Viking Age, right? Long ships, raids, big bearded guys with axes. But what if I told you the most powerful person in the room, the one who could start and end wars, wasn't holding an axe at all? What if they were operating from the shadows of the long haul, wielding a weapon far more dangerous?
So, think about this for a second. In a culture that was basically defined by the sharp edge of steel, axes that split shields, swords that sang in battle, what do you think was the single most dangerous weapon? I'll give you a hint. It's definitely not what you think.
The answer? Well, it wasn't forged in fire. It was spoken. The most lethal weapon in the entire Viking Age was a word, a memory, a perfectly crafted insult. They called it the speech rune, the power of incitement that could command a killing far more effectively than any king.
Okay, let's dive into our first section, a weapon of words, and the social function of the Havort. And we need to be clear here, this wasn't just about someone having a sharp tongue. This was a formal, recognized social role, a weapon, really. And it was a weapon wielded almost exclusively by women. We're talking about the Havort.
So what exactly is a whetter? The Old Norse word is hvot, and it literally means to whet or to sharpen, like you'd sharpen a blade. And that's exactly what they did. They sharpened the resolve of their men. And you have to get this wasn't seen as just being cruel, it was a necessary social function. In a culture built around blood feuds, these women were the architects of vengeance.
And this is where it gets so fascinating. Look at the incredible paradox here. These women were legally barred from fighting. They couldn't pick up a sword in a feud. So what did they do? They took on this other, arguably more powerful role. They became the primary guardians of memory. Think about that. They were the living record of every slight, every unavenged death. So while men might be tempted to make peace or accept a settlement, the Whetter's job was to make sure that never happened. Using shame and memory, it was their duty to keep the tally and force the men to act.
All right, Section 2, the betrayed Valkyrie, from warrior to Whetter. Now, to really understand how this worked in the real world, we've got to turn to our main character for this story, the legendary Brynhild. Her story is the perfect embodiment of the shift from being a warrior in her own right to a woman who has to wield the weapon of words.
So Brynhild's story is a tragedy. She gets tricked and betrayed by the hero Sigurd and his in-laws, and she ends up trapped in this web of deceit. All of a sudden, she's not a supernatural shield maiden anymore. She can't fight her own battles. She's now a high-status mortal woman, and she has to play by the rigid rules of this new world. And in that world, she has exactly one weapon left: the power to incite others to fight for her.
And just look at this transformation. It is absolutely night and day. As a Valkyrie, her realm was the heavens. Her weapons were sword and spear, and she fought for the gods. But as a mortal Whetter, her world shrinks to the domestic hall. Her weapons become words and memory, and she's not fighting for divine will anymore. Nope. This is a battle for her own personal honor.
Okay, next up, Architects of Vengeance and the Playbook of Incitement. So how did a Whetter actually do her job? What was the playbook? Because this was so much more than random nagging. This was a highly structured, almost ritualistic performance designed for one thing and one thing only: maximum psychological impact. At the very heart of it all, the so-called original sin of the Whetter was the direct and incredibly skillful manipulation of the male ego. The whole goal was to shame the men of her family so deeply that they felt they had no other choice. They had to abandon any thought of peace and return to the primal law of an eye for an eye. And there was a literal, step-by-step ritual for this. First, you present the evidence. Brandishing the bloody clothes of a murdered family member was a classic, powerful move. Second, you directly question the masculinity of your men. You challenge their honor. Third, you invoke memory. You run down the whole list of insults and deaths that are still unavenged. And finally, you demand vengeance. You close off every exit until the only path left leads to bloodshed.
This is exactly what Brynhild does to her husband Gunnar, and she does it with lethal precision. See, she isn't just telling a lie about what she claims Sigurd did to her. She is performing this ritual of social pressure perfectly. She questions Gunnar's honor, she presents him with a false memory, and she leaves him with absolutely no choice but to seek the ultimate undoing of his own blood brother, Sigurd.
All right, next section, the Ring and the Rage. And this is all about the Whetter's duel. Now we get to the spark that lights the whole forest fire, and it all comes down to a confrontation between two women, a single piece of jewelry, and a public humiliation that could only be washed away with blood.
I mean, it sounds incredible, doesn't it? How can one simple gold ring become the catalyst for the deaths of heroes and the total collapse of a kingdom? It's because in this world, an object can be so much more than an object. It can be proof. So the key scene is this quarrel down by a river. It's between Brynhildr and Sigurd's wife, Gudrun. Now on the surface, they're arguing about whose husband is braver, but that's not what they're really fighting about. They are fighting for their own social standing. This is it, the ultimate Whetter's duel, a public fight where the weapons aren't swords, but status and reputation.
In the middle of this argument, Gudrun reveals the ring, Anvaranáut, on our finger, and Brynhildr just freezes. She recognizes it. It's the ring she gave to the man who rode through her wall of fire. A man she thought was her husband Gunnar, but was really Sigurd in disguise. That ring is no longer just gold. In that moment, it becomes a token of truth. It's irrefutable proof that she was tricked and publicly humiliated. It's the burning threshold that once you cross it demands a slaughter.
And so here's the thing. Brynhildr's incitement works. It works perfectly. She becomes the Whetter, she gets her revenge. But this is not a simple victory. The price of restoring her honor is the destruction of literally everyone and everything she knows.
And this is where her celestial logic meets brutal pragmatism. Her husband Gunnar and his brother, they're sworn by oath to Sigurd. Their hands are tied. They can't kill him. So Brynhild targets their younger brother, Guttorm. He's too young to have sworn any oaths, which makes him the perfect unbound tool. She finds a clean hand to do a very dirty deed.
Guttorm murders Sigurd in his bed. When the news reaches Brynhildr, she doesn't weep. The saga tells us she laughs for joyless laugh. It is such a chilling moment. This is the bitter fulfillment of the Whetter's duty. Her honor has been restored, but her world is now ashes. The victory is completely hollow.
In the end, Brynhild demands to be killed and placed on Sigurd's funeral pyre. And in this final act, she takes up a sword herself. The Whetter, who used words, and the warrior, who used a blade, are finally reconciled in this one moment. She proves to everyone she was always willing to pay the ultimate price for the vengeance she demanded.
So what do we take away from this incredible story? This is the Whetter's legacy, the sacred horn of memory. Because the role of the Whetters is so much more than a mythological footnote. It's a powerful parable for understanding the complex dynamics of honor, gender, and power in the Viking Age.
Let's break down the key lessons. First, words were weapons, full stop. They were capable of shaping your fate, or word as the Vikings called it. Second, honor wasn't just an abstract idea. It was a living thing that had to be fed, and it was often fed with blood. For a woman like Brynhildr, this led to the Shield Maiden's choice: live in silent shame or die with roaring integrity. And the Whetter, in the end, is the eternal guardian of that blood oath, making sure honor is always upheld.
And this quote really just sums it all up. Brynhildr's story reminds us that true power doesn't always announce itself with a war horn. Sometimes the most dangerous, world-changing power is the one that speaks quietly from the shadows of the hall, sharpening blades with nothing but words.
Which leaves us with a final thought to chew on. When a society legally forbids a group of people from wielding conventional power, from holding the swords and axes, do they just give up, or do they simply go and find other, sharper weapons to fight with?